Hi, and welcome to our AWP panel. Writing is for everyone. Ways to make writing in the classroom more accessible. We're so glad that you could join us. We are a group of both writers and educators who have experience in special ed or with learning disabilities, and we're going to talk today about how to build on making writing more accessible for those with disabilities, especially as it relates to in the classroom, because during Zoom-based learning and distance learning, which was prevalent throughout 2020, and I'm sure continues today, that was an opportunity to make writing more accessible for neurodiverse people, and we want to continue to build on that. And we're going to talk about that today, about how we as writers and educators can continue that momentum, especially as we return to in-person learning. I'm the moderator of the panel, Colin Mustful. I am a publisher. I am the founder and editor of History Through Fiction, a small independent press. But in addition to that, I actually work in K through 12. I'm a special ed paraeducator in the Anoka-Hennepin School District in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota. And I work directly with students who are on individual education plans. So I help implement any strategies, any tools necessary to help students with disabilities to achieve their educational goals. Today, we also have with us Leticia Escalara, Kristen Francoeur, and Kathleen Markath, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Kathleen, could you start?
Yeah, I'm a new author. My first book, My Monster Truck Goes Everywhere With Me. I have a bachelor's degree in Deaf Community Studies from Madonna University. I worked numerous schools and children with disabilities, with deaf and hard of hearing, and I've done a lot of volunteer teaching of sign language with hearing students. So, yeah, glad to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kathleen. Kristen, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Kirstens Francoeur. I am a writer and educator living in very rural Vermont. I am a multi-genre published author in memoirs and in contemporary fiction, a ghostwriter, and also have been a career special educator and administrator for support services with in my case, the expertise specifically in working with students with emotional and behavioral disabilities. And I am thrilled to be part of this because writing is just plain so cool.
Yes, I definitely. Leticia, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Leticia Escalera. I'm from the Bay Area, Oakland, California. Um, I'm, I'm a person with a learning disability, a writer with a learning disability, and I'm very thankful and grateful for the educators that helped me to learn to write and prepare me to be able to accomplish this goal of becoming a writer. And that's why I really like this group, this panel, because it would help us give some information to the instructors that are working with kids with learning disabilities to 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 give them some supports and hands-on experience in regards to the importance of teaching kids to write.
Well, welcome to all of our panelists. And Leticia, I wonder if you could actually start off and talk a little bit about your background as a learner with disabilities and your experience in the education system learning how to write.
Okay. Um, um, my interested in writing started when I was a young child, probably approximately 6, 7 years old, and I really enjoy the storytelling. Hearing those stories. And I think you have to come familiar with the stories and learn to enjoy those stories in order to begin to have that interest in writing stories. And so that was my experience. And like any other child, you want to succeed in with your goals for your professional life, and I always enjoy this aspect of reading and writing in a different way because of my learning disability. But I I began to explore about writing when I was in my advanced English classes later in my life, and I always enjoy writing the stories, writing the essays, and I felt like I had a good opportunity to be able to become a short story writer. And and when I was in college, I wrote a story and showed that story to my teacher. I really worked hard in it, and and I had a great description of the events of the story, and it was just wonderful story. And but my teacher was not very impressed, and definitely that was discouraging. And but I took it as a challenge to apply myself to study harder and to improve my writing skills. But definitely, I always grateful for those teachers and in the classrooms that are really sensitive to the needs of their students, and they are aware of those students that need extra support with their writing processes. Um, um, Fortunately, during that time, I also had a Spanish class where I used to write stories as well in Spanish. And my teacher then told me that my writing in Spanish was well, and that that was going to help me to learn how to write in English well too. And so I was encouraged again to continue to pursue the writing during those times. And I don't know if I'm taking too much, or I can just finalize this part.
Oh yeah, continue. No, this is it's really wonderful to hear that this your whole journey, and especially everything that goes into it, not just learning disabilities, but English as a second language and things like that.
So it's amazing what the instructors can do and the school system can do to include students with learning disabilities and also severe disabilities as far as writing. And for that, I'm going to share this experience I had in my computer class. I met a young man where was in the computer class, disabled student computer class, and couldn't speak, or he couldn't use his upper extremities, and he used to type with a stick that was placed on his forehead, and that's how he wrote his stories. I was amazed. I was amazed to see this man typing his stories with a stick on the computer. And that really, really brought so much light to me in regards to continue inspiring, aspiring to write. And so he shared the story with me with the computer software, reading computer software. The computer will read his story. And I wrote this. He shared the story, and it was a sad story with a wonderful description of his life experiences. Um, and I still remember his gentle and happy smile. Very emotional.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
As I listened to his story, this gentleman had a wonderful story, and if I would have seen him before, I would probably doubt that he would be able to write a story. And his story was beautiful, and I think I learned from his writing style. Uh, was in That's why I believe in inclusion, and giving that opportunity to people with learning disabilities or even severe disabilities, as I mentioned, to be able to dream. That they can become storytellers, writers. And at this time, when I saw that, I also met an author that gave me a copy of his novel, and where he wrote in his novel, I was like surprised, and he said he put in his dedication. He encouraged me to pursue my writing dreams of becoming an author, and I was like, oh, I just want to write. I didn't think about becoming an author. I just, one of those, you read a dedication and you say, oh, great, that's beautiful. But definitely it did encourage me. These two gentlemen encouraged me to, to pursue my dream of writing. I still remember, oh, well, I'm sorry. Then I was assured of my possibilities to become a short story writer, and therefore I could pursue this goal of becoming an author. I continue working on developing my skills, my writing skills, and taking writing classes, reading articles, books, and literature from other writers. This is this is this is how one of the processes in my life to have the encouragement to pursue my dreams and to believe in the dreams, becoming a writer, and now and also an author. And so this empowered me. These two examples, and many other writers' examples, show me the greatness of storytelling and empower me to continue to believe in the greatness of storytelling. So
Yeah, I think there are a lot of great reminders for us there. Um, I love that word that you just used, is empowerment. But as you brought up, I think all of us, we all are drawn to stories, whether we're reading stories or we're writing stories. It's a human emotion to be, natural storytellers. And I think you made a great point that inspiration can come from anywhere. And we as educators might get kind of bogged down in the strategies of it sometimes. But as you pointed out, I mean, it can come from fellow classmates, and it can really come from anywhere. It could come just from your attitude on a day-to-day basis. How you never know what's going to stick with people, and also you brought up points of not to judge anyone and to think about, oh, this person is capable of that or this person is capable of that. All of us have a story to tell. We just have different ways to tell it. So yeah, I really thank you for sharing those stories with us. Kathleen, I want to move on to you. Let's talk a little bit about your writing background, but then also how you help students who are deaf and hard of hearing.
Okay, so my writing began with journaling, and from there I took a course with the Institute of Children's Literature, but I kept working my day job, and until I was invited to a retreat where we learned a song in sign language, and all week long that song was like on my hands and in my head. You know, that song gets stuck in your head. And then the following week, we signed the song. And like in that instant, something charged through me. But then it wasn't until 2010 when my mom became ill, and I spent some precious time with her and promised not to let life pass me by with, forgotten dreams. So that fall, I enrolled at Madonna University for a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree in sign language. And during those 4 years, I volunteered and observed both the deaf and hard of hearing, different programs in schools, and then I was also teaching students in a hearing school sign language. And it was through those experiences that I learned so much. So with the second grade class, I would begin by just sharing some sign language with them, and then each week I would give them picture cards, and with the picture cards, they would get into little groups of 2 or 3 students, and they'd have 10 or 15 minutes to create a story, and then they would stand in front of the class and tell a little story. It was always something very silly. You can imagine second graders are very silly. So they would tell these great stories. But what the teacher noticed, and I noticed, was before long, there were a few students in the classroom that were underperformers. They were, kind of in their little box. They're in their little worlds, all to themselves. They became very more social. And the teacher remarked at how all of their classes they were improving in. So we saw that miracle in second grade with just a little bit of sign language and a lot of fun where everyone was included, everyone was encouraged to participate. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear, going all the way down to second grade to see how an assignment like that can spark our imaginations, just a little story card like that. Kirsten, could you speak a little bit about peer conferencing and what that is? And Kathleen brought up kids being social with one another. So I think they can certainly help each other out. But then also, what are the dangers that come with students working one-on-one with each other?
Sure. The practice of peer conferencing usually starts especially in public education, in third grade and goes up through high school. And the idea is that usually a teacher assigns 2 classmates to work together, share their pieces of writing with each other, and make suggestions to their partner. And in theory, if all students have, I would say, equal confidence in their abilities, there are no inequities in abilities, socioeconomic status, any questions of mental health issues, any of those sorts of pieces that come into play. It's a beautiful theory. Having said that, in my now almost 30 years of experience in special education, what I've seen is that kids have a pretty darn good sense of how their peers view them and how their teachers view them, in terms of, unfortunately, teachers assuming often that students, especially neurodiverse students or students with disabilities of various sorts, that they are somehow not as capable as their peers. Has nothing to do with capability. It has to do with, are we providing the correct supports? And so if you put a student who, because of just, say, their processing speed, that their processing speed on a writing prompt, they have written 20 words and their peer partner has written 150 to 200 words. When they share those pieces, it is, no matter how kind the partners are to each other, there is an inherent emotional beating up of one of those members. And it really causes, I used to, I was a school principal and assistant principal for decades, and I would track my disciplinary referrals. And my office was hopping on any day at the middle school level, any day where there was peer conferencing in the English classes. I could just plan my day because students were going to find a way to get out of that class because they felt they were being judged. And instead, looking at ways in which getting input from other students is a great idea if it can be done in a safe environment, or if it can possibly be from an older student, say several grades older or several grades younger. If you're talking in terms of description and details in stories, especially emotions, having younger students listen to a piece and say what they felt about it can be really powerful in a good way. Or older students who don't have some of the social connections or status pieces to come into play.
You made a good point there about not making assumptions about abilities or even judgments about who can or can't do a certain writing task, because we all have different abilities, different talents in various areas. And so it's really about providing those correct supports. I wonder, Kirsten, if you could talk more about what tools are available other than just giving a student pen and paper and saying, write. How else can they express their ability to be storytellers?
That's a great question, Colin. I recently had the joy of seeing a student that I had worked with almost 15 years ago. And when I worked with the student at the time, it was really the onset of the use of dragon speaking naturally as a way for students to read and to write. And I was talking with this student who's now a very successful businessman, and said, how did you feel about the tools we gave you back in elementary and middle school? And his response was, you guys were trying really hard, but if you had just let me use my cell phone and the dictation aspects on my cell phone, I wouldn't have looked like a freak. And I would have been able to be more comfortable in my writing. So I think we have incredible tools. Many of the speech to text and text to speech programs are great, but I think we sometimes forget to talk with students about what works best for them. Any of us who have our own children in that teen and older range know that their cell phones are their lifelines. And so much of this now can be done through the use of a phone. But I'd also say that there are so many different ways. Think about some of the great, say, young adult novels that have used both using text, but also using really great illustrations that are so important to the writing. I'm thinking specifically of Diary of a Wimpy Kid that engaged millions of kids worldwide. And so I think, allowing kids to use the technology or the format that works for them, not assume that we as adults always know what's best for them in that, and also say that writing isn't always just about how many words you can get down on a page. It's the power of the words and the structure.
Yeah, definitely very good points. And I work in a high school every day, and we're constantly struggling with the cell phone issues. But you make a good point that um, if it's what they are familiar with and what works for them, sometimes we have to take ourselves out of it and what we think works. Leticia, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what works for you personally to be a writer. And you didn't, in your earlier, you talked a lot about what you saw other writers doing, but you didn't talk about your own book and how you got to that place. So talk about what works for you, what strategies works for you, and let's also, can we hear a little bit about your book?
Sure. It's very interesting because writing is a process that is a wonderful way of sharing your ideas, but it's also work. And but my strategies to learn to write and develop writing was that um, I always knew that I have to put in extra time. I had to be realistic and know that I have to put extra time. I always tell people my leisure time was always it has been always less than fun, and I don't mind because you can only have so much fun when you're young, but when you become an adult, you have to kind of bring live by that model. Leisure time less than fun. Work um, less leisure time less than work. I'm sorry. So the strategies I use my whole life, and it's always been that I use that extra time. If I'm writing, like say a piece of writing, like 5 pages that I wrote for this conference, it usually probably takes someone like 5 hours. It's taken me about 20 hours. So it's an example of to have some understanding of this process. Um, I what I usually do is I learn to edit as I write, and it's interesting because I started writing when the computers did not correct. Remember those times? Computers didn't correct. That's how old I am. So I learned to edit as I type because I had to I didn't want to wait till the end of the paragraphs to go back and correct again. So I would edit as a type. That's one of the things I did. So I'm thankful for those phones and computers. I would say yes, let the students use them because it would give them a little extra time in for them to have a relaxing time from the work they do as a student. Um, and I use as an adult I still use a phone for my vocabulary and grammar and corrections, and I use that computer as well. um, because of my grammar and vocabulary deficiencies, I need also well, I use the computer software to proofread every piece of writing, uh, such as sentences, paragraphs, and chapters. I do that multiple times. And then when I read the paragraphs in my software, I can able to detect where the fluency is not appropriate, and then I look into correct that. make more corrections. I like to edit the work I do up to probably 80% of my accuracy, and that takes me work. But I like to do that because I want to challenge myself to be able to do that as much as I can, and then after that, I use the professional editors to do the edit. I did it for the book. I was able to create the stories and write and work on the development of the stories by myself and some volunteer editors. And then I, I, use a professional editor. So by the time it went to the editor, there was not that much of work as far as creating the stories and working on the development, but just mainly editing. And because of my vocabulary deficiencies, definitely I always have assistance with the development, with the development of the story and the writings. Uh, and one of the methods I use writing this book was that the way I used to see the books when I used to read books, the paragraph formation and the styles, I use a lot of that to write the book. So I use different technique methods, and during school I learned to create an outline to do the development of the story, and also definitely you must go to school to 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 improve your reading skills and to become to better your expertise, to your writing expertise. You need to go to school. I took about 5 different English classes, and prior to that, I took another 5 ESL classes, English classes. The last class I took at the community college was at the university level. That class was credited to. If I transferred to a university, I didn't have to take the English class at that university, but I could English 1B. That was the last one, the highest class at the college level, community college level, and so I definitely use the reading software. Um, uh, First, I think first I want to say I work myself on the writing pieces. Then I use the reading software, and then I use a professional editor, and that's the process I use. And and because of the limitations I have, this process really works very well for me. Because of the inabilities for me to learn the grammar, I use a computer. And because of the memory deficiencies that I can't memorize uh, um, extensive vocabulary, I have to use the computer dictionaries, and and uh, and definitely I think most of all we need to use an edit to proof a book to be published, and that's I'm part of that group. And
Well, Leticia, I think you make a lot of good points that are valuable for any writers. But I think you also remind us that it's important to have some patience and empathy, because I've written a book, and it is such a long process that requires a lot of discipline. You talked about discipline, but for students who have learning disabilities, it's important to remember that it takes a little more time, a little more structure, and I think those are all good reminders that you're giving us.
mhm. And that's basically that's my strategies to write. And I'm planning to write another book, poetry book, and so now I was trying to take a class, but it got too overwhelmed with my schedule because I'm taking another class at the community college. And but definitely I think that if you wanna do something, you must study to to make it happen. It won't just appear. There is a process.
Definitely, it won't just appear. That's a good point. Kathleen, I wonder if you could talk about some of the challenges faced with, well, talk about the importance of American Sign Language and some of the challenges that DHH students face, and how to educators like yourself um, meet those challenges. Kathleen, could you unmute yourself?
There we go. Yeah, so the number one priority thing is language. So a child, and I can give this example. I met a student for the first time. He had not received any prior services for sign language, and I signed to him, and he understood me. So, sign language is very visual language. We all know that children learn differently. We all learn differently, and I've learned through the process. I'm a very visual learner. So that's the biggest challenge is language. And to kind of illustrate that, I came across Raymond Antrobus, and he wrote this book. He's deaf, and he wrote Can Bears Ski? So this was a book he wrote because he wished he had a book like that when he was growing up. So can bears ski? And he goes, why do people keep asking me, can bears ski? And the kids in the cafeteria would say, can bears ski? And then he would say, can bears ski? And they laughed, So that very well illustrates the challenge for the deaf and hard of hearing student is that they weren't saying, can bears ski? They're saying something else. So it was understood that way. So like nothing makes sense. And then consider a conversation, they're talking about something and you're watching they learn how to read lips and they read body language better than we do. But there's still sounds and, things that you just miss. So I'm thinking of another example, like, if you're doing a little, talk or reading a story or something, and a word comes up that they might know what the meaning. Well, I'll explain it this way: a curb. Do you know what a curb is? We all know what curbs are, right? So a deaf child might know what a curb is, but not know that it's called a curb. So it's very important to build language. And like Kirsten said earlier, the iPad and telephones are so great for that because okay, we're going to read this story today. We have our vocabulary list today. And they're looking at it and it's not making any sense to them. They're repeating the word, as best they can, or finger spelling the word, signing the word, but it still doesn't mean anything to them because they don't know what it is. So you use your iPad or phone, the computer, something to show them that image of the word, to explain the meaning so that they can connect with it. So those are the big, the big challenges. First of all, is language. And then also, as Kirsten mentioned, being able, we all learn from teaching, right? When you teach, you learn. So if you can take your student in third grade or fourth grade who's, performing under the other ones, and let them go to the second grade, first grade, kindergarten, and teach them something, they come back with so much, I can do this. I know something. And then the other thing that I've learned and seen is that, so maybe the deaf or hard of hearing students not so great at reading and spelling and writing, but they're phenomenal in maybe science or math. Now they have an upper hand with another student in the class who can read, the biggest books and the biggest words, but doesn't have a clue about math. So finding their skills and their talents, and that's one thing I strongly believe, that every child has a gift to give. They all have something that they're good at. So it's finding that thing that they're good at and using that to build their confidence and trust. And so when you share the story that you wrote in sign language, and that's like another part of it. If a deaf and hard of hearing child comes from a home where ASL is fluently used, maybe the whole family is deaf and hard of hearing, maybe they all use sign language, so it's very fluent in sign language, but then translating that into English is very different. American Sign Language comes from France, so the structure of the language is different, and a lot of words are left out. So my name is, we don't leave is out. Okay, so there's lots of little words that aren't signed, but they're understood. There's so being able to take what they understand and then putting it into words is like another challenge. So it's just working with them one-on-one, giving in small groups, working with the teacher, giving them the experience of success and just building step by step, little by little. But also, so now they've identified all their words, they understand the meaning of them all. And so if they're going to write a little story, they, their sentences are going to start small. So then it's just building confidence, like, well, what color was that favorite dog of yours? And how big was he, and questioning them to add those other words. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, I love what you said about making learning or making it visual, and also just about building confidence, about experiencing success. And I think we all need that no matter where we're at in life. So those are all
Right.
Great points. So I'm curious about, so I I spent most of 2020-2021 school year distance learning. We tried to get back in person, but it didn't work. We had to go back to distance learning. And that was really challenging for the teachers, but certainly for the students, not having access to their teachers, not having direct access. So I'm wondering, for each of you, what kind of challenges did you face during that time? And then have you been able then to take any lessons from, how important it is to connect with students, for instance, now that we're back to in-person learning for, well, most of us anyways. Kirsten, can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, the remote learning or the hybrid learning models had a range of success in terms of kids and families responded differently to them, as well as the teachers did. And for some students, the lack of direct daily in-person contact with the teachers and with their peers in the same sort of manner was very detrimental to them academically, as well as especially mental health concerns. For other students, and for many of the neurodiverse students that I work with regularly, there were some real benefits to the remote time and the increased use and acceptance of technology. in that, for example, and she knows I use this example often. My oldest grandchild is a child, a neurodiverse child with a very, very specific severe learning disability. And she made more progress in the 6 months she was remote than she had made in her entire school career. And the reason for it was that when her teacher was speaking on Zoom, she didn't hear or get distracted by her classmates because they were able to shield her screen differently. She could focus on the teacher, kept direct eye contact on the teacher, and she made huge gains. She also, in particular with her writing, made huge gains because she could write. The teacher saw it directly. They weren't trying to do, say, peer conferencing during that time. And she felt that direct connection, almost like Leticia was talking about editing. The teacher was giving her direct feedback just on her pieces, and she could learn and grow from that. I think, though, the one piece that we also saw in the remote learning was because so much of it had to be flexible in terms of timing. We also found that for the older students, there could be some success about flexible and creative timing of things, such as you have to watch this this video about cell structure from biology class, but it's taped. And if your time that for you as a learner, you can absorb new vocabulary best at 10 o'clock at night, you could watch it at 10 o'clock at night instead of at 8 o'clock in the morning, because no ninth grader is capable of really taking in big vocabulary at 9 in the morning. And so I think there was an ability to have some of that flexibility. The biggest detriment was that teachers and other caring adults in the buildings could not see close up any signs of stress and or some of the daily needs of students, such as meals and health services, slipped by the wayside with remote learning.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points about some of the advantages of distance learning that can be forgotten. So both, yeah, definitely have their advantages and disadvantages. Kathleen, do you want to add your experience during that time?
Well, I'm going to pass on that because I didn't have any experience teaching through the computer during that time. I was watching my grandchildren and writing a book. So but I appreciate what Kirsten said. I can see where that was an advantage. And I've heard that for some students, it was an advantage. And for other students, it was disaster, that they couldn't focus. They needed that actual one-on-one and not that little distance, that the computer provides. So I've heard it, good and bad on both sides. And like she said, some kids thrived with it and others fell behind.
Leticia, what's your experience? I mean, we're here right now in a Zoom conference. Do you like it? Are there things that you didn't like about it? What's your personal experience with this kind of Zoom-based learning?
Okay, I did it right because some aspects of the Zoom is good because I don't have to be around a lot of people, and I feel more calm to do things. But then the technical part is difficult because if you like this different program, I was trying to figure it out, and it makes me feel awkward. Awkward because I like to have everything in control and know what I'm doing and have some type of order. And when something is not there, it also makes me a little nervous. So, but I'm able to. think I'm able to manage more the Zoom experience than the in-person experience. Is just different. The in-person is, like I said, being around more people is just different, and it really distracts you a little more. But I wanted to finish with something that I wasn't able to finish in the other part, and just the last about writing the book. That question you made, and so um, after everything I mentioned in regards to the work and the process, when I considered writing a book, I decided to write about living with learning disabilities, and my interest was to provide information for other learning disabled individuals on how to overcome the various obstacles and how to accomplish their personal, educational, and professional goals. I think have gone through that process myself. I know we need the supports, we need the help, and I really appreciate the special education system of this country, um, because of that, and I was able to accomplish my educational goals. And my recommendation for the teachers, with all due respect, is is for the teachers, as as a writer with a learning disability, is to let their students know that they can learn to write to the full fullness of their capacity, if they invest the work and the time needed pursuing this goal. Also, to be open to explore the extra supports in the professional editing if necessary. Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear you say those things. To hear that the system was successful for you, and that you are able to put in that time and energy and work with other available resources to make it work for you and to get your story out there, and then to encourage others to do the same. That's wonderful.
And I just want to say the last thing. I had few teachers that told me that I couldn't. The special education teachers proved them wrong, because they saw that we students with learning disabilities and different disabilities can accomplish goals and can learn. And so I really appreciate all the teachers that take the time to educate kids with disabilities.
Yeah, that's really encouraging, especially for those of us who are working every day with in special education. I do want to explore that a little bit further. So, in my situation, I work with about 50 different students on my caseload during any different trimester. But I just can't reach all of them. I certainly can't work one-on-one with them. And Chris, as a former school administrator, I wonder if you can. And we don't have a whole lot of time, but if you could just talk briefly about how we meet those challenges of being overwhelmed, and what we can do, as a system, as a whole, and personally.
I think one of the things the systems can do, and I advocate strongly for this, is the systems need to take the things out of educational assistant and special educators' hands that could be done by somebody else. For example, the endless amounts of paperwork that have to be done, Medicaid forms, those sorts of things that take our times away from students. Having said that, I think there also are ways to do creative grouping in very short term, very targeted direct instruction with students in fun ways. And in terms of writing, I've seen great success with working with middle school and high school students using the model of Twitter, where tell a story in this number of characters and making it into a game, and students making huge gains with it. But I think it's really targeting the direct instruction and interventions needed, instead of lumping every kid that we say has a writing disability or has adverse effect in writing, putting them all together and assuming that everybody has the same need. Instead, target it very carefully.
Well, I think this has been a really great conversation. I wish we could continue it. We weren't able to cover, as much as maybe we would have wanted to. But before we end here, I want to give everyone a chance to let the audience members know where they can connect with you. So, Kathleen, first, let me ask you, is there anything else you want to add, any input you want to add on to what we've been talking about? And then how can people get in touch with you?
Okay. Yeah, just real quickly, I wanted to kind of tie my story all together with that. As I explained, teaching this, it was second and third and fourth graders. First year I taught half the second graders. The second year I taught all the third graders. Well, it turns out that Italy did a research on that, kind of did it the same as we did without the testing. They tested every 6 months, and those children that learned sign language did 15 to 20% higher scores on all the testing that they had done. So that just attests to that. But the important part of that is that sign language is for everyone, writing is for everyone. If everyone is included in sign language, in learning sign language, then that child won't feel excluded. So that's huge for me. So our book is available on my website, www.aslpicturebooks.com. I can be reached by email at info@aslpicturebooks.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm very honored that the book has won the Kirkus Starred Review, Certified Great Reads, Reader's Favorite Bronze Medal, and Silver 5-star. So it's doing very well out there. And so the story was inspired by my 3-year-old grandson's love of monster trucks, and my accountability was my granddaughter, who told everyone that I was writing a book. So there's so much to share. And as I said before, I believe every child has a gift to give. And if we can somehow tap into that, and if they can shine in that one area, then we've done them right. It was a pleasure sharing this with you today, and happy writing.
And we'll include all this information in downloadable additional resources for those who are attending. Leticia, is there anything else you want to add, and where can people get in touch with you?
I want to thank everyone that is going to take time to listen to this conversation, and my hope is that you find it useful. And the book I wrote is a memoir called A Journey to Begin in Life. And that's where I talk about learning disabilities, living with learning disabilities. My email is leamador50 at gmail.com. I would invite you to also read the book and learn more about one person's life living with learning disabilities, because I know there's many other that perhaps are writing too about their experiences, and many to come that will be writing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, any final thoughts from you?
I just want to say that every child has the ability to it can become a great writer if we as educators believe in that child enough that they can then believe in themselves. My memoir and my novels are available in bookstores and through Amazon under the author's name of Chris Frankor. And my author's website and the best way to contact me is www.authorkfrankor.com. And it's been an absolute joy to be part of this panel.
Well, I want to thank all of you for being a part of the panel. I want to thank everyone who's out there listening. And I think it's been a great conversation, and it's definitely been insightful and definitely worthwhile. I'm glad we did it. You can find my books online at colinmustfull.com. I'm a history writer. I write historical fiction. I'm also a historical fiction publisher, and you can find me online at historythroughfiction.com, and you can email me at editor@historythroughfiction.com. So thanks again. This has been great, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.